"Take my children, please," she begged. The cowboy's next words changed everything. The rain poured heavily over the small town, turning the dusty roads into thick mud. Thunder rolled across the dark sky, echoing through the empty streets. Maria clutched her thin coat around her, shivering as she hurried through the storm. Her hair was wet, plastered to her face, and her shoes squelched in the thick mud. She held the hands of her 3 children tightly, knowing that they were cold, hungry, and scared. Every step she took felt heavier than the last. Maria had been trying to manage on her own for months. Her husband had left suddenly 1 year ago, leaving her alone with their 3 young children. Leela, who was 7 and always worried about her little brother and sister. Sammy, who was 5 and loved to ask questions but often looked frightened when things went wrong. And Ella, the youngest at 3, who clung to her mother's coat as if it were her only shield from the world. Money had been tight ever since. Rent was overdue, food was scarce, and the small savings Maria had worked so hard to keep were gone. This night was worse than most. A storm had trapped them inside their tiny apartment with a leaking roof and broken heater. The wind howled through the cracks in the windows, and Maria had spent hours trying to comfort her children while figuring out how to keep them warm. But no matter what she did, the fear in their eyes mirrored her own panic. Finally, after a long night that had offered no rest, she made a decision. She couldn't face another day knowing she might fail them. She had to find help. That's how she ended up running through the rain toward the outskirts of town where the local ranch stood. She had heard stories about Jack, a cowboy who had a kind heart and a reputation for helping people in need. He was a man of few words, but those who knew him said he had saved neighbors, animals, and even strangers from trouble without hesitation. Maria prayed that he would listen, that he would understand, that somehow he could take care of her children when she felt she could not. Her coat was soaked through, her shoes squelching, and her hair dripping water into her eyes. She could barely see through the sheets of rain. She clutched Leela's hand tightly and held Sammy and Ella close, murmuring reassurances even as her own voice trembled. When she reached the large wooden gates of the ranch, she pounded on the door with trembling hands. Her children whimpered behind her, too exhausted to speak. The door swung open to reveal Jack. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and looked every bit the cowboy people described. His hat was soaked, his jacket covered in rain, but his eyes were sharp and observant. "Maria, what's wrong?" he asked, recognizing her immediately. Maria's voice broke as she spoke. "Take my children, please," she begged. I can't do it anymore. I don't know how I can take care of them. I'm so tired, Jack. Please, just keep them safe." Jack's brow furrowed. He had seen desperation before, but the raw fear and exhaustion in her eyes struck him in a way that was almost painful. He looked at the 3 children standing behind her. Leela clutched Maria's coat, Sammy fiddled with the hem of his shirt, and little Ella buried her face in her mother's legs. Jack could see the hunger and weariness in their eyes, the fear of losing the only person they trusted. He stepped back slightly, letting Maria and the children inside the dry warmth of the ranch. She followed him quickly, brushing the rain off her coat, but her hands shook as she held onto the children. Inside, the ranch smelled of hay, horses, and wood smoke. It was cozy and welcoming, but Maria hardly noticed. Her mind was spinning, her heart pounding, and the words she had just spoken felt heavier than any storm she had ever faced. Jack motioned for her to sit, while he went to check on the fire in the hearth. He returned with a warm blanket, wrapping it around Maria's shoulders. "Calm down," he said quietly. "Tell me everything." Maria took a shaky breath, trying to explain her situation. She told him about her husband leaving, about the struggles of feeding the children, paying rent, and staying warm during harsh nights. She explained how she had tried to manage alone, but the weight had become unbearable. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her heart, and she felt a deep sense of shame and fear. Jack listened without interrupting, watching the children carefully. Leela peeked out from behind Maria, and Jack gave her a small, reassuring nod. He could see that this girl had been forced to grow up too fast. Sammy's hands twitched nervously, and little Ella clung tighter to her mother. The children were tired, hungry, and unsure, but there was also something else, something in their eyes that made Jack feel protective. After a long silence, Jack spoke. "You're not alone tonight," he said. "And you're not alone in this either. I can't promise I have all the answers, but I can make sure your children are safe, at least for now." Maria blinked back tears. She had expected rejection or advice she couldn't follow or worse, silence. But Jack's words carried a weight she didn't expect, a promise she could believe in. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." The children, sensing the calm in Jack's voice, began to relax slightly. Ella peeked out from behind Maria's legs, and Jack crouched down to her level. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." Ella blinked at him, unsure, but then nodded slowly. Leela and Sammy moved closer to their mother, and for the first time that night, they felt a tiny spark of hope. Jack led them to a small room in the ranch that could serve as a temporary bedroom. He gave each child a dry towel and helped them into clean clothes he had kept on hand for emergencies. He explained gently that they could sleep here tonight and that he would make sure they had food. Maria watched him, still trembling but grateful beyond words. She had never imagined that someone would step in like this, that someone could offer safety and warmth in a world that had felt so cruel. As the children settled down, Maria sat by the fire with Jack. The two of them were soaked, tired, and cold, but there was a quiet understanding between them. She explained how hard it had been to keep the children fed and warm, to protect them from the harsh realities of life. Jack listened intently, nodding occasionally, never judging, only offering reassurance. Hours passed as the storm raged outside. Maria watched the fire flicker, thinking about the dangerous streets and empty apartment that had seemed like a prison. She looked at Jack and realized that he was the first person who had truly offered help without judgment. He had stepped forward without asking for anything in return, simply because it was the right thing to do. Finally, exhaustion overcame her. She tucked herself into a chair by the fire, still wrapped in the blanket Jack had given her. She glanced at her children, asleep in the small room, safe and warm for the first time in weeks. A wave of relief washed over her. Tears ran down her cheeks, not of shame this time, but of gratitude. Jack stayed by the fire a while longer, keeping watch. He could hear the rain tapping on the roof, the wind whistling through the trees, and the soft breathing of the children in the next room. He thought about the responsibility he had just taken on. This was more than a temporary act of kindness. It was a choice that could change all of their lives. And for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond the ranch work and the quiet life he had always known. By the time the storm began to die down, the ranch was quiet, except for the crackling of the fire and the occasional sigh from Maria as she slept in her chair. Jack looked out the window at the clearing, seeing the muddy footprints and the wet coats, and he knew that tomorrow would bring challenges. But tonight, they were safe, and sometimes that was enough to begin healing. As he finally settled into his own bed, Jack thought about the words Maria had said. "Take my children, please." Those words had changed everything, not just for her and the children, but for him as well. He realized that courage wasn't just about facing storms outside. It was about facing the storms in life, stepping forward when someone needed help, and offering a hand when no one else would. And for Maria, sleeping beside the warmth of the fire, she dreamed for the first time in weeks. Not of fear, not of worry, but of hope. The storm outside had raged, but inside the ranch, a quiet warmth had taken root, promising that maybe, just maybe, everything could be all right. The morning sun streamed through the gaps in the wooden walls of the ranch, turning the damp hay into a warm, golden glow. Maria stirred from her chair, still wrapped in the blanket Jack had given her the night before. The storm had passed, leaving puddles across the yard and the fresh smell of rain lingering in the air. She rubbed her tired eyes and glanced toward the small room where her children slept. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. Jack was already awake, standing by the fire with a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. He looked older than he was, with worry lines on his face and a strength that came from years of hard work. Yet there was a softness in his eyes as he watched the children sleep. He had never considered himself a father figure, but last night had changed that. He realized that caring for these children would not only help them, it would also teach him a new way of living, one that involved compassion and responsibility in a way he had never known. Maria approached him quietly, hesitant to disturb the calm of the morning. "Jack," she began, her voice soft. I don't want to ask too much, but do you really mean it, about taking care of them?" Jack turned to her, setting down his cup. He gave her a steady, reassuring look. "I do," he said simply. "I can't take away all your worries, but I can keep them safe. I'll make sure they eat, stay warm, and most importantly, feel cared for." Tears filled Maria's eyes. She had been terrified that asking for help would make her seem weak, that people would judge her for struggling. But here was a man who didn't judge. Here was someone who simply offered help, steady and unwavering. She nodded, barely able to speak, and left the children to wake slowly. When Leela, Sammy, and Ella finally opened their eyes, they were greeted by a cozy, dry room filled with soft blankets, a small fire crackling in the corner, and the smell of pancakes. Jack had prepared a simple breakfast, something warm and filling for hungry children. At first, the children were hesitant, clinging to their mother's legs, but Jack knelt down to their level and smiled gently. "Good morning," he said. "I made breakfast for everyone. You're safe here and you don't have to worry about anything right now." Leela peeked out from behind Maria, her dark eyes wide with curiosity. "Really?" she asked. We can stay here," Jack nodded. "As long as you need to, we'll figure it out together." Sammy's eyes grew wide and he looked at Jack carefully. You mean it?" he asked, his small voice trembling. Jack nodded again. The boy's face lit up with a tentative smile. Even little Ella, still holding onto her mother, relaxed slightly when she saw the kindness in Jack's face. After breakfast, Jack decided it was time to introduce the children to the ranch properly. They walked outside into the soft morning light, where the air smelled of wet grass and horses. The children's eyes grew wide as they saw the animals, horses, chickens, and even a few goats moving around freely. It was a new world for them, one that was safe and full of life, a stark contrast to the cramped, cold apartment they had left behind. Jack began with the horses, showing the children how to approach them slowly and speak in calm voices. Leela, brave and cautious, reached out to touch the soft nose of a brown mare named Daisy. Sammy followed, giggling as Daisy sniffed his small hand. Little Ella clung to Maria, but Jack held out his hand to her gently. "Come on, little one," he said. "You don't have to be afraid." Slowly, with encouragement, Ella stepped forward and touched the horse. A smile spread across her tiny face, and for the first time she laughed in days. The morning passed with laughter, learning, and exploration. Jack showed them how to gather eggs from the chicken coop, how to feed the goats, and even let them help with small chores around the barn. Maria watched from a distance, a mix of relief and awe on her face. She had feared losing her children, feared that the world had nothing safe to offer them, but here at the ranch, they were learning, growing, and most importantly, feeling secure. By midday, Jack realized that caring for the children would require more than just teaching them chores. They needed stability, routines, and emotional support. He decided to create a schedule for them: meal times, playtime, learning, and bedtime. The children adapted slowly, but Jack was patient, guiding them without pressure, making sure they felt involved and safe. During lunch, Maria stayed nearby, helping with small tasks and observing Jack's calm way of handling the children. She began to feel a sense of trust she had not felt in months. Jack was not just helping. He was connecting with them, showing them that life could be kind and that people could care without expecting anything in return. As the afternoon sun rose higher, Jack suggested a small walk across the ranch fields. He held Leela's hand, letting her help guide Ella and Sammy. They explored streams, wildflowers, and open meadows. The children's laughter filled the air, a sound that warmed Maria's heart. She watched them run freely, their small legs moving fast across the soft grass, and felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps life could be better than she had imagined. But Jack also noticed small moments of sadness and hesitation. The children missed their mother, and the weight of their past struggles lingered in their eyes. He knelt down with them by the stream, letting them dip their hands into the cool water while he listened to their fears. Leela spoke first, whispering about nights when she had cried because she was hungry. Sammy admitted he had been scared of being alone, and little Ella simply hugged her mother and whispered, "Don't leave me." Jack listened patiently, nodding and offering gentle reassurance. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "I'll be here and your mom will be here too. We're going to make sure you're safe, happy, and cared for." By evening, the children were tired but content. Jack prepared a simple dinner and Maria joined them at the table. They ate quietly at first, then began to talk, laugh, and share stories. The warmth of the fire, the soft lighting, and the comfort of being together began to create a sense of home that the children had not known in months. After dinner, Jack suggested a small bedtime routine. He read a story to the children, letting them sit close and feel secure. Maria tucked them into bed, noticing that they slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. She looked at Jack, her eyes full of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Jack shrugged, trying to appear casual, but there was a quiet pride in his eyes. "You don't have to," he said. "The important thing is that they're safe. That's enough for now." The night passed quietly, the children sleeping soundly, the storm of the previous night now only a memory. Jack and Maria stayed up for a while, talking quietly about what the future might hold. They knew challenges awaited them, finding stability, managing daily routines, and helping the children heal from past fears. But they also knew that together, they could face those challenges. Before finally going to bed himself, Jack looked at the children's room. The soft glow of the nightlight illuminated their peaceful faces. He realized that he had never felt this kind of responsibility before, but it was not frightening, it was meaningful. He had been given a chance to make a difference, and he was determined to do everything he could to protect these children and help them grow. Outside, the ranch was quiet. The wind whispered through the trees, and the stars began to twinkle above the open fields. Inside, a small family had begun to form, one born not of circumstance, but of care, trust, and compassion. Jack knew the road ahead would not always be easy, but he also knew that this was the first step toward healing, hope, and a brighter future for Maria and her children. And for Maria, sitting by the fire and watching her children sleep, a heavy burden she had carried for months finally began to lift. She had asked for help, and in return she had found safety, kindness, and the promise of a better tomorrow. For the first time, she dared to imagine a future where her children could laugh freely, learn without fear, and feel truly loved. The days at the ranch passed steadily, filled with routines, laughter, and the occasional challenge. Jack had settled into a rhythm, balancing chores, the children's needs, and the quiet work of the ranch itself. Maria visited often, grateful for Jack's steady care, but still carrying the heavy weight of her past struggles. The children were happier, more confident, and beginning to laugh freely again, but the scars of fear and insecurity lingered beneath their smiles. One morning, Jack woke early as usual. The sun had barely begun to rise, painting the fields in soft gold and pink. He brewed a pot of coffee and moved quietly through the house so as not to wake the children. Outside, the world smelled of fresh grass and damp earth, a sharp contrast to the cramped apartment they had left behind. Jack looked toward the small room where the children slept, remembering the fear in their eyes the first night. Now they were peaceful, and he felt a quiet pride that he had helped create a safe place for them. Breakfast was calm but cheerful. Leela had learned to help Jack set the table, while Sammy eagerly fetched milk and eggs from the small kitchen shelves. Ella, still small but growing braver by the day, sat close to Maria, occasionally reaching out to touch Jack's hand. The children's laughter rang through the kitchen as they ate, a sound that warmed Jack's heart. After breakfast, Jack decided it was time to give the children more responsibility while still keeping it playful. He taught them how to check the water troughs for the animals and how to brush the horses safely. Leela quickly mastered the task, her confidence growing with each stroke of the brush. Sammy struggled at first, impatient and clumsy, but Jack stayed patient, showing him step by step how to handle the animals gently. Even Ella, though too small to manage a horse, helped collect eggs and feed the chickens. Jack noticed the small signs of their emotional growth. Leela smiled more freely, laughing at the way a goat nudged her hand. Sammy began asking questions not from fear, but from curiosity. Even Ella, once so clingy, ran short distances ahead of Jack, trusting him to keep her safe. Maria watched quietly, tears in her eyes, realizing that the children were slowly becoming the happy little ones they had once been. But life at the ranch was not without challenges. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in, dark clouds swallowing the bright sky. The wind picked up, rattling the barn doors, and the rain began to pour. Jack immediately noticed the change and herded the children inside. Leela and Sammy clung to him, while Ella hid behind Maria. Jack remained calm, giving instructions and comfort. "We need to get the animals inside," he said. "Stay close to me and don't be afraid, we'll take care of everything." The storm grew stronger, turning the yard into a muddy swamp. Jack worked quickly, bringing the horses and goats into the barn, making sure each animal had food and water. The children helped as best they could, carrying small pails and feeding the chickens. Despite the fear of thunder and lightning, they began to understand that with Jack guiding them, even dangerous situations could be managed safely. As the storm raged outside, a strong gust of wind knocked over a stack of hay, narrowly missing Leela. Jack's reflexes were fast. He pulled her out of the way and held her close. The children looked at him with wide eyes, realizing just how serious the situation could have been. Jack smiled gently, ruffling Leela's hair. "See, you're safe. That's all that matters." After the storm passed, the ranch was a mess. Mud covered the ground, branches were scattered, and some of the smaller fences were broken. Jack and Maria worked together with the children to clean up, turning the labor into a game. Leela and Sammy laughed as they carried small branches, racing each other across the yard. Even Ella helped, dragging a piece of rope with all her might. Through these challenges, Jack noticed how much the children were growing, not just in confidence but in character. Leela showed responsibility, Sammy learned patience, and Ella learned trust. Maria observed quietly, marveling at how Jack had brought stability and love into their lives. He wasn't just a caretaker. He was a guide, protector, and steady presence they could rely on. But emotional growth came slowly. One evening, as the children played in the yard, Leela stopped and looked at Jack seriously. "Will you always be here?" she asked, her small voice trembling. Jack knelt down, looking her in the eyes. "I'll be here as long as you need me," he said softly. "No matter what, you're safe with me. You and your brothers and sister, you're all important to me." Sammy ran over, tugging at Jack's sleeve. "Even if we mess up?" he asked. Jack laughed gently. "Especially then," he said. The children giggled, feeling reassured. Maria, standing nearby, felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she could imagine a future where her children were happy, safe, and loved, not just surviving but thriving. One day, a small medical emergency tested Jack's resolve further. Ella, curious as always, climbed too high on a low fence and fell, scraping her knee badly. She began to cry, and Leela panicked. Jack quickly cleaned the wound, applied ointment, and bandaged it carefully while Maria comforted Ella. "There," Jack said softly, holding her hand. "All better now, you're okay." Ella sniffled but smiled weakly. "Thanks, Jack." That moment cemented a deeper bond. The children realized that Jack was not just helping them with chores or giving them food. He was protecting them, keeping them safe, and showing them that the world didn't have to be frightening. Weeks turned into months. Jack and Maria worked together to create routines, balancing chores, learning, and playtime. The children's laughter filled the ranch every day, and even on hard days, they felt a sense of security they had never known before. Maria began to trust Jack more deeply, seeing how patient, strong, and caring he truly was. Jack, for his part, learned patience, empathy, and the meaning of family in a way he had never expected. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a home. He found himself thinking about the children even when he was busy with other tasks, and he began planning small surprises to make them happy: freshly baked bread, a small swing by the barn, or a special game on rainy afternoons. The bond between them grew quietly but steadily. One evening, after a long day of chores and play, Jack and Maria watched the children run across the fields, their laughter echoing against the distant hills. Leela had learned to ride a pony with confidence, Sammy chased the chickens gleefully, and Ella toddled beside Maria, holding her hand. "It's amazing," Maria said softly. "They're so different now, happier, stronger." Jack nodded. "They've always had strength," he said. "They just needed a chance to feel safe, to trust someone." The children, sensing the calm and love between Jack and Maria, gathered around them as the sun set. Jack lifted Ella onto his shoulders, while Leela and Sammy held Maria's hands. Together they watched the orange and pink sky, feeling a sense of peace and belonging. But life at the ranch still had challenges. Crops needed tending, fences needed repair, and storms could still strike unexpectedly. Jack knew that every day would bring new lessons for the children and for himself. But he also knew that as long as they faced these challenges together, they could overcome anything. The months at the ranch had changed all of them. The children had learned courage, patience, and trust. Maria had found hope and support she never thought possible. And Jack had discovered the joy of caring for others, the responsibility of protecting lives, and the quiet fulfillment of making a difference. That night, as the children slept soundly in their beds, Jack sat by the fire with Maria. They spoke quietly about the days ahead, about plans for school, work, and small joys they could share together. The storm that had brought them together now seemed a distant memory, replaced by warmth, trust, and a growing sense of family. Jack looked at the children through the doorway, sleeping peacefully, and felt a quiet determination. No matter what challenges came, he would protect them, care for them, and help them grow. The bond they had formed was unbreakable, built on love, trust, and shared experiences. And for Maria, seeing her children happy and safe, she felt a lightness in her heart she hadn't known in years. Jack's words, his patience, and his care had changed everything. The children were no longer frightened or uncertain. They were loved, secure, and beginning to thrive. In that quiet night, with the fire crackling and the ranch peaceful, a new chapter of life had begun for all of them. The hardships of the past still lingered in memories, but the present offered hope, joy, and a promise that together they could face anything. The early morning sunlight filtered gently through the windows of the ranch house, casting a soft glow on the wooden floors. The sound of birds singing in the fields outside added to the peacefulness of the morning. Maria moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing a simple breakfast while glancing occasionally toward the children's room. Leela, Sammy, and Ella were still asleep, their faces relaxed and calm, a stark contrast to the fear and exhaustion they had carried just months before. Jack entered the kitchen, brushing his hands on his jacket after checking on the animals outside. He smelled the coffee Maria had made and smiled. "Morning," he said softly. "Smells good." Maria returned the smile, feeling a sense of ease she hadn't felt in a long time. "Morning," she replied. "I think they're finally getting used to all of this." She gestured toward the children's room, where soft laughter could already be heard as Leela began to stir Sammy and Ella awake. Breakfast was cheerful. The children laughed and talked about small adventures from the previous day. Leela showing Ella how to feed the chickens, Sammy carrying a basket of eggs and pretending it was treasure, and Ella giggling at the sight of the goats jumping around the yard. Jack and Maria watched, their hearts full. It was a simple scene, but for them it represented months of hard work, patience, and care. After breakfast, Jack suggested a walk across the ranch. The children eagerly agreed, running ahead while Jack and Maria followed at a slower pace. The fields were green and wide, stretching as far as the eye could see, dotted with flowers and grazing animals. Leela took Ella's hand, guiding her carefully, while Sammy darted between the horses, laughing. Jack watched them, feeling a sense of pride and deep satisfaction. These children had faced hardships that no child should endure, yet here they were, laughing, exploring, and trusting him and Maria. It was a reminder of how resilience, love, and care could transform lives. As they walked, Maria spoke softly to Jack. "I never thought we could reach this point," she said. "I was so afraid I'd fail them, but seeing them like this, I feel like maybe there's a future I didn't think was possible." Jack nodded. "They've always had strength," he said. "They just needed someone to help them feel safe and loved, and now they do." The walk turned into a small adventure. They found a shallow stream, and Jack let the children play in the cool water. Leela carefully helped Ella step across small rocks, while Sammy tried to balance on a log like a tightrope. Jack laughed, his heart light, watching the children enjoy the simple pleasures of nature. Maria smiled, noticing the happiness that radiated from their faces. Later, back at the ranch, Jack and Maria began talking about the future more seriously. They discussed schooling, routines, and small plans for the children's happiness. Maria expressed her desire to work part-time while also ensuring she was there for her children. Jack promised to support her, providing stability and care so that the children would continue to feel secure. The conversation also turned to more personal matters. Maria admitted she had been hesitant at first, afraid of asking for help or trusting someone outside her family. Jack listened quietly, holding her hand gently. "You did the right thing," he said. "Asking for help doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong, and it's made a difference for all of us." The children joined them in the late afternoon, and together they worked on small projects around the ranch. Leela helped plant flowers along the fence. Sammy repaired a small gate under Jack's supervision, and Ella carefully watered the plants. Maria and Jack worked alongside them, showing them how to handle each task. The air was filled with laughter and chatter, creating a sense of normalcy and joy that had been absent for so long. As evening approached, Jack suggested a small picnic outside. They gathered blankets, sandwiches, and fresh fruit, sitting under a large oak tree near the fields. The children played nearby while Jack and Maria watched, sipping lemonade and talking quietly. "I never imagined life could feel like this again," Maria said, her voice soft. I was so afraid, but now, seeing them happy, seeing you here, I feel like we've been given a second chance." Jack looked at her, a quiet smile on his face. "We have," he said, "not just for them, but for all of us. Life can be hard, but it can also be beautiful if we face it together." The children ran back to them, carrying small flowers and showing their discoveries. Leela had found a butterfly, Sammy had picked wildflowers, and Ella proudly showed a small rock shaped like a heart. Jack and Maria laughed together, enjoying these small moments that had grown into a sense of family. Night fell, and the ranch was quiet except for the gentle sounds of animals and the soft rustle of the wind through the trees. Jack tucked the children into bed, making sure they were warm and comfortable. Maria kissed each of them gently, whispering words of love and encouragement. The children drifted off to sleep, dreaming freely and without fear. Once the children were asleep, Jack and Maria sat by the fire, reflecting on how far they had come. "I don't think I've ever felt so connected to anyone," Maria admitted. "You've been more than a helper, Jack. You've become part of our family." Jack nodded, his eyes soft. "And you've taught me more than you know," he said. "I never realized how much it would mean to care for someone else so completely. It's changed me." The quiet moments stretched late into the night. The fire crackled gently, and the stars shone brightly in the clear sky outside. Jack and Maria felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that had been missing from their lives for years. They had faced hardships, uncertainty, and fear, yet together they had created something strong and lasting, a family built on trust, love, and care. Over the following weeks, life at the ranch became a steady rhythm of happiness, growth, and learning. Jack continued to teach the children practical skills, but he also encouraged their creativity and imagination. Leela began drawing pictures of the ranch. Sammy wrote small stories about their adventures, and Ella danced and sang happily as she played outside. Maria encouraged them, joining in their games and helping nurture their talents. The bond between Jack and Maria deepened as well. They shared quiet moments, working together to solve small problems, supporting each other, and learning to communicate with patience and understanding. Their partnership was not based on romance alone, but on mutual respect, trust, and the shared responsibility of caring for the children. One afternoon, the community around the ranch noticed the change. Neighbors and friends saw the children laughing, playing, and learning. They saw Maria confident and supported, and Jack attentive and nurturing. People began to admire the quiet strength of their new family unit. Jack and Maria were no longer just individuals managing challenges. They had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of kindness. The children began school with a newfound confidence. Leela made friends quickly, showing leadership and empathy. Sammy enjoyed learning and storytelling, while Ella thrived with attention and encouragement. Maria and Jack supported them every step of the way, attending meetings, helping with homework, and celebrating every small success. As the months passed, the ranch became a place of joy and security. The children grew stronger and happier, and the bond between them and Jack deepened. He had become their protector, teacher, and friend, a figure they could rely on completely. Maria, too, had regained confidence in her abilities as a mother, knowing she was supported and that her children were thriving. One quiet evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jack and Maria watched the children play in the yard. Leela laughed as she climbed the fence, Sammy chased a butterfly, and Ella toddled behind Maria, giggling. Jack put his arm around Maria's shoulder, feeling a warmth that went beyond the simple satisfaction of a job well done. "They're happy," Maria said softly. "Really happy." "I never thought we could reach this point." Jack nodded, watching the children. "We did it together," he said, "all of us, and we'll keep doing it every day." The children ran to them, tired but smiling, holding hands with both Jack and Maria. They looked at the sunset together, the golden light casting long shadows over the fields. It was a simple moment, but for them it represented everything: safety, love, trust, and the promise of a bright future. As night fell, the ranch grew quiet. The children slept peacefully, Maria and Jack sat by the fire, and the stars sparkled above the fields. Life was not perfect, and challenges would come again, but they had built something lasting. They had found hope, love, and family in a world that often felt uncertain. And in that quiet, peaceful night, with the fire crackling softly and the ranch resting under a blanket of stars, Jack realized something profound. Courage, compassion, and care had the power to change lives completely. One simple decision made in the heart of a storm had created a new beginning for Maria, her children, and himself. For Maria, seeing her children safe, happy, and thriving, she felt a peace she had never known. She had asked for help, and in return she had found love, trust, and a second chance at life. The ranch had become more than a home. It had become a sanctuary, a place where hearts could heal and where hope could grow. And together they faced the future with strength, love, and an unbreakable bond.